kicked them off the park. The challenge for him, he's done that 5 weeks in a row, and the challenge for him now is to do it 6 weeks in a row and then 7 weeks in a row. So we're just asking them to do nothing that is outside their skill set, but that's the reason why they're becoming more consistent. And with consistency, they're having more confidence, and with more confidence, you're going to get better results. But there's a real fine balance when someone tries to solve something on their own or go away from what they've been doing successfully. That's when things start to turn. So credit to them. The staff and the players all understand what their roles and responsibilities are. Jono?
Now, just moving on to the SG Ball team, they had an amazing win, and there's probably a lot that we can talk about with the win that they had and the circumstances that they faced. But leading up to that, the great week of preparation was recorded by your strength and conditioning coach, Neil Dunkley, and that video has been shared on the Cumberland Throw. It's also been shared through our social media. Has there anyone here been able to watch that video of the SG Ball's preparation this week? I mean, how great was that to be able to see what they went through in their preparations? Can you talk us through how that came about, Joey?
Neil's a perfectionist, as most of our staff in our junior rep program, and we touched on it 2 weeks ago about the level of commitment and professionalism that is expected at this club. With respect to other trainers at other clubs, Neil Dunkley is more qualified than the role that he's undertaking at the moment at Parramatta. So we're really blessed to have someone of that talent involved with our elite 18 and 19-year-olds. It came about because he just wanted to share with a group of people, his staff, his friends, the players, about what a week takes. What do we do in a week? Because it's often because it becomes such a routine, 60s. They know they train Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They turn up at this time and this time. But until you reflect on it, you don't actually understand the effort and the programming savvy that goes into by the staff and followed by the players. So it gives you a visual indication of how hard you are working and what you do behind the scenes in order to get your body ready to play that weekend.
Can I just ask too, because we've got Brett Kenny on later today, and back in the day, they'd train, Tuesday, Thursday, they might have a run on a Saturday morning. Is it fair to say that the amount of training and the preparation that goes into junior reps these days would equate to what the first grade footballer would have gone through in days gone by?
I think the actual training would rival an NRL team or a first grade team of the 80s. However, with respect to those teams, again, I don't think the level of analytical vision would be less than what they're doing now in our Harold Matthews and SG Ball program. On top of what they physically do in the gym or on the field, the amount of intel that our coaches are getting, the amount of statistical data that they're being shared within the staff, we would have more access to data or footage and statistical information than what previous first grade sides have done in the 80s. And Brett Kenny would be, that era. And that just gives you an understanding of how good players and people like Brett Kenny were. Imagine if they had the access to resources that players have today, how good they would have been. But it's all relevant to the times. But we're really blessed with our S&C staff and our coaching staff, because the expectation on them are set more at a higher level than other clubs.
So anyone that hasn't had a chance to have a look at that footage that we've got on the post, we've got it as the junior reps a week in the life. Just go to the Cumberland Throw and you'll be able to access that footage.
It's interesting to point out too, 60s, is that you've got a squad of 25 players. The trainer and the coach needs to be across the three cross sections, and the three cross sections are the players that played on a Saturday. They would have a alternate or a different training program than the players that played on a Saturday that played less than half a game. The conditioner would have to alter the training session to top those players that didn't play for more than 30 minutes to accommodate their fitness level to the same level of the players that would have played the whole game. Then you've got players that weren't selected or players returning back from injury. So there has to be a rehab program that the trainers have to follow in order to get those players back on the track. And the last one is that there are players that weren't selected that are not injured, and their level of training would be incredibly different to every other group. So for an elite programs pathway system for our females, males, 17s and 19s, to ask someone at that level to have 3 or 4 different training programs, and the coach have different coaching programs, not just on one day, but every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, that gives you a level of understanding, commitment, because it's something that you just can't foster the day or an hour before training. There's a lot of planning that goes into that.
It's literally like a teacher who has to cater for all the levels of kids in a classroom and all their levels of learning, is that the coach is catering for all the levels of the players within that week.
The only difference between them, they're both teachers. The only difference is the teacher earns a lot more money than what our development coaches do.
Yeah.
But in essence...
it's a passion, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a passion.
Yeah.
In essence, the coaches, the trainers, they're somewhat teachers without a degree, a teacher's degree.
Yeah. All right, let's keep it on with the SG Ball. They've banked that big win over the Raiders, which puts them now just 2 points behind first and second place, but they're still in a precarious position in sixth place themselves. We speak about with other teams trying to put bad losses behind you, but equally so, do they have to try and put the good win behind them and sort of refocus on the competition moving forwards?
They do, and at training last night, I witnessed, and it was actually led by Peter Tateo, who's been an amazing leader out of that group. He challenged the players on 2 or 3 occasions when they were moving from drill to drill. He brought them all in before they went to their next activity, and he said, no complacency. That was the key. Because the only thing that will stop the SG Ball team from making the top 6 is complacency. So that's been identified by the staff. Steve O'Day and his staff already spoke about having respect for the opposition. We briefly touched on that last week in your podcast. However, with the Tasha Gale, they have to leave nothing left in the tank.
It's win out for them,
It's win or they don't make the finals. Mm-hmm. So it's a real good point that you touch on, because if they go in with a level of complacency and a lack of respect for the Sharks, the Roosters, the Victorian Thunderbolts and so forth, the SG Ball that is, they'll miss out.
Now, speaking on the Sharks, we were going to do a preview of the action this weekend, but as we've just found out, given the rather heavy inclement weather that's over Sydney, the junior reps for the Eels has been postponed or cancelled?
No, it's been postponed. The way that it's worded in the email from New South Wales Rugby League, we currently have 9 rounds. Round 7 has been officially postponed. That will be pushed back. If you can imagine, that'll be round 10.
Okay.
So we'll continue to have round 8, continue to have round 9.
And then bounce back to
and then it will go to the lost game in round 7 and push back the semi-finals, quarter-final, semi-final, grand final.
Correct.
1 week.
There's 3 weeks of finals in this new format. Yeah.
Now we're going to have a bit of a flashback.
Blast
this
from the past
mate.
for Joey.
This is... Anyone that's not familiar with this is actually quite amazing. Back in 2004, Joey Grimer coached an Eels Harold Matthews team to the premiership, and at his disposal was quite an amazing group of players. Joey, can you just run through some of the players that were in your squad in 2004?
Yeah, it was a special squad. They don't come around too often, and I was very humbled to be the head coach of that squad. we were lucky 60s. We had 9 first graders come from that age group in 2004, those young 15 and 16-year-olds. Out of that group, there were 2 internationals and 5 state of origin players. So players like a very young and dynamic Jared Hayne. And the speculation and the talk about Joseph Sawali reminds me a lot about when Jared Hayne was coming through. A lot of people that saw Jared come through said there's a lot of similar traits between Joey Sawali and Jared Hayne. So that him as our fullback was incredible, just to see someone with so much balance and grace. But we still had to remember he was only 15 years of age. We had Tony Williams, who played on the right wing.
At T-Rex.
It wasn't fair playing him on the wing, so I ended up putting him in the back row. But he played on the wing. In the centres, we had Tilima Tautai,
Yep.
who played a lot at our club here at Parramatta and was very successful and won Super League Grand Final for Wigan.
He became a middle forward, didn't he?
Middle forward, yep. So we went from centre to back row to middle forward.
The Ruben Wiki special.
Yes, he's a Ruben Wiki special, all right. In the halves, we were blessed. We had Christopher Keating at 5'8", and arguably, I've been around junior reps for 29 years, the most talented 15-year-old I've ever seen at any club in that program. His halfback partner was Trent Hodgkinson.
This is amazing. Like, just listening to all these names in the one Harold Matt's team.
And we were blessed in the forward pack. We had Timmy Manor as our front rower, Tim Robson, Chad's younger brother, who played for Manly, played a bit for the Roosters. Now he's playing locally for Hills District. And we had a young fellow called Blake Lazarus, who played 3 or 4 games for West's Tigers. So 9 first graders from that side. Really humbled, really blessed. But coaching that side didn't come without its challenges.
And speaking of coaching that side, I do want you to walk us through that, because it's a team of superstars on that level, and quite a few of those go through to being superstars at the highest levels. But we've seen the tape, and we can see that they actually weren't, just pass it to the best player. They're actually quite well drilled and well coached. So this is your chance to give yourself a pat in the back, mate, and also maybe talk about the challenges of coaching that team.
The major challenge, Jono, for coaching that particular team, I'll go back. I'll talk about something else, and I always say this to my coaches and the staff at our place at Parramatta, and it's always been like this. Clubs that play against Parramatta, the level of their success can be gauged by how well or how poor they play against Parramatta.
They're like a litmus test in that grade.
Unbelievable. Everyone wants to challenge Parramatta and somewhat Penrith, because arguably they've got best junior districts, best junior programs, and history shows that they have a lot of success. So someone's season, a team's season, could be justified by how well they play against us. Not only is that a factor, having a team with such players, the opposition only wanted to get up just for that game against Parramatta. So they played their grand final against Parramatta. We played 9 grand finals every week before we got to our grand final. The level of lift by the opposition, sometimes we done a good job on them and blew them off the park, but we never went into a game knowing that it was just going to be a win, because we knew the expectations against us. We knew what the opposition wanted. We knew what the opposition coaches were telling their players. Not only do players lift when they play Parramatta in the juniors, but particularly with this one. And that was our biggest challenge, keeping them grounded, but not letting them become complacent. So we had to set rules around that. We were very, very strict, because we knew if we gave them an inch, as they say, they would have taken a mile. Mm-hmm. we had more rules with that age group than what we've had before, because we needed to keep them grounded, but we needed to keep them real to what they needed to do to win. Their ability alone would have got them across the line, but it was more than that. Jono, it was more than that. We had to make sure that we had 22 players in that squad, and we had to make sure they all contributed equally in a way that wouldn't remove or take away anything away from any other player. And that's what you're talking about in that video. The highlights that you saw from that DVD that I gave you just showed players that came off the bench, their contribution would be greater, if not similar, to what the strike players, the Jared Haynes, the Chris Keatings, they were challenged, and we had parameters and rules and skills metrics that they had to achieve. That side was way mature, their maturity was greater than any other 15-year-old age group side, and that's probably why they were the team and the players that came through that squad.
And just to that, Joey mentioned just then that we were able to see a video package of the season highlights that was put together way back in the day when it actually during 2004. The thing that stood out that Joey just mentioned was the number of players who excelled beyond the players who were who became name players, and I think that's pretty much what you're alluding to there as well. As I was watching it, I was sending messages to Joey like, you know, who's player 14, player number 14, who's the fellow with the cornrows, just to find out who some of these players were, because I figured, well, I don't remember them playing with Parramatta, but surely they kicked on as well, and for different reasons they didn't. But I am still going to come back to some highlights, because I think people could probably picture this. There's a slew of Jared Hayne tries that are on that highlight reel. But the one that stood out for me was against the Tigers at Leichhardt Oval. There's a grubber kick that's put towards the corner post. Jared Hayne, this is him as a 15-year-old, goes sliding over into the corner. He's on his knees. He picks up the ball. He jumps to his feet. He evades the first couple of chases, and he runs 100 metres for the try. Now, we saw highlights like that in his NRL career. He was doing that as a 15-year-old playing junior reps. It was amazing stuff.
He was amazing. Arguably the worst trainer that's ever played first grade. I would have hated to see if he actually got fit at that age group. He was a horrendous trainer, but I was very fortunate, 60s, that age group I had in their Harold Matthews, in their SG Ball, and leading into the old Jersey Flegg under-19s program. So to have that group of men for 4 or 5 years, it was a real honour, and hopefully what me and my staff in challenging them made them, all contributed to them being the player that they are today.
You've seen a lot of young talent, obviously, but in regards to that 2004 squad, did you know at any point that like a given player would be a first grader? And what about a star player or a sort of first grade potential player? What makes you realise that they will realise their own potential?
That was relatively early in my coaching career. I'd been coaching for about 3 or 4 years at the elite level. And I always felt that whilst I've seen a lot of gifted footballers at 14, 15, at that age group, that didn't necessarily make them NRL players. And that probably gives more clarity to how good these players were in this squad. History shows that not many players are successful being the best 14 and 15-year-olds. History shows that. So to see them at that age be so far more dominant than any other team allowed me to believe that I had some elite players. Whether they would have played first grade or not, I was probably too early on in my career to identify that, but we knew we had some gifted players. as I stayed with them for 3 and 4 years, in 2006, Jared Hayne was a 17-year-old. Actually, he might have turned 18. It was 2007, excuse me. He made 3 Australian sides that year. He made the Australian Schoolboys, the Junior Kangaroos, and the Prime Minister's 13 as an 18-year-old. Then I knew he was going to be something special.
That's a good answer. Right.
And, you know, with Jared, I didn't know if his ability was going to take him so far, given that he wasn't the most diligent trainer. Mm-hmm. He'd done everything you asked of him. There was never a problem with that. Just where he finished. For someone that ran 2 and 400s, you know, at a state level, at a very, very quick pace, he didn't do them particularly well at training. So
he was a gamer, not a trainer.
Yeah, he was a gamer and not a trainer, absolutely. So whilst I thought they were pretty special, I didn't realise till about 2006, 2007 that we had some really special people here at our club.
Now I'm going to make this a bit of a double-barrel question. But firstly, is there a rough percentage of junior rep players that go on to play a single NRL game? And secondly, and we do already sort of know the answer to this, is that type of percentage communicated to the players who are in our programs?
The first part is, it's a two-pronged double-barrel question. I'll answer the first part. Traditionally, up until 7 or 8 years ago, Harold Matthews was of the 15 age group. If you asked me that same question then, less than 1%, 1 in 100 Harold Matthews players would make first grade. Fast forward to 2020, 21, 22, the Harold Matthews age group is 17. So that 2-year age gap, we won't know the evidence until another 5 or 6 years, but we know that percentage is going to be much greater than 1%. Mm-hmm. Traditionally, going back to when I played Harold Matthews and coached Harold Matthews, 1 in 100. And we had 9 out of that team.
Shows you how hard the path to being a pro footballer is.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So that gives you the first part to the question. If you can just remind me what the second part is.
Second part is, I suppose it's basically communicating to the players about having a plan B. Like, is it communicated to them just how tough it's going to be for them to have a career in the NRL?
We've had, over the last 12 months and 2 years, before every player commences training within our elite program, 60s, we invite them in to an information session. At that information session, David Gower, who is led by Dean Feeney in the welfare space, deliver a 5-10 minute introduction to all the young men and young women that are in our programs, from our under-14s development squad 15s, Harold Matthews Cup, SG Ball and Tasha Gale. He outlines the difficulties of becoming a full-time rugby league player because of a number of things. His delivery explains why most players don't make it and gives them a thought process to think of when you come into our joint at Parramatta. Not only do you need to have a plan A, but you need to have a plan A. He doesn't call it a plan B. He calls it a plan A, to have a plan A. But to answer your question, 60s, absolutely, he recognises and spoke to the parents were there with the younger kids, explained to them that not many are going to make it in this room. So they need to be aware that the education programs that we run to ensure that their mental well-being is achieved or at a good level. So not necessarily done by myself or the coaching staff, but it's certainly done by our welfare and education team.
And I think that's probably just as much an important message for the parents, I imagine, as it would be for the kids.
Well, we've all seen it at football games, we've all seen it at sport games. There are kids out there that are playing for their parents. The way that their parents react and react about how they play, the parents are really important in getting the right information. We're now coming across 60s 14-year-olds that haven't made a representative program, signed player managers, player agents, which meant that the law had to be changed. The New South Wales NRL changed the law to 15 and 16. So that's where our game's going. And it's not the child that makes that decision at 14 to have a player agent. It's mum and dad and the parents.
Guardians,
So it's really important to engage with them, to express to them, them as parents, what is the realistic, what is reality? How many are going to make it? How many are not? And these are the reasons why. So it's really important. And Dean Feeney, Dave Gower, our wellness, our staff there are really proactive in that space, making sure that the parents, particularly, we started a program this year. It's called Talanoa, with Pacific Island, the Pacific nations, Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, Papua New Guinea. A Talanoa is a conversation between Indigenous Polynesian families or Polynesian people. So George, our pastor, who also works with the Polynesians, organised all the Pacific Islanders and trying to engage in their parents to come in so they can have a Talanoa, because a lot of the pressures on these kids come from their parents. Some of that is cultural, some of that is just generic expectation.
That's an excellent answer, Joey. Now, we couldn't let you go off at least one big money coaching question for the NRL. We already quickly reflected on round one action, and we decided that it was a pretty ordinary first half, followed by a pretty good second half. Now, as a coach, how do you focus on the sort of the fallout of that match? Do you look at the good, the bad, or some sort of balance of the two?
Yeah, look, the first half, you don't have to look far to understand why.
Yeah, it was pretty obvious.
It was pretty, it was, it wasn't a first grade standard, particularly standards of Brad Arthur and his staff set. Mm-hmm. To have 13 errors in the game, and majority of those 11 errors in the first half, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to work out that, hey, that's your problem right there. And I'm sure Brad and his staff would have identified that. To a lesser extent, he wouldn't have harped on it, but they would have known. You know, when they drop the ball 11 times in one half of football, you're not going to be in front on the scoreboard. Yeah. So that's one area that Brad would have spoken to the team about. The other area that is a big area that we need to win today, particularly in this rain, is the kicking game. We spoke briefly about what is a high finish and a low finish. We have a number of kicks that we execute from various plays on the field, and we rate those kicks as of what are the right kicks and what execution. So they get a score. Now they're either deemed to be high or low. We need to be, every kick needs to be a high, or we need to be above 90% in our high finishes. The kicking game is paramount today. Similar to the Dragons and Cronulla game. They scored all their tries basically from kicks. So it's massive today. So that's one area where Joey's been working with the staff, and Brad's come up with a kick plan. And the other area, I think, watching Melbourne Storm, I reckon they can have a bit of value. I hope George Jennings doesn't listen to this, because I like George. He's a good fella. But I reckon if they target George and target Smith and Jennings on that edge, they might get a bit of value.
The Rabbitohs certainly look to have some success against that edge.
I watched that game twice, and I know Brad and his staff would have watched that too. So I think that you don't have to dwell too much on what went wrong in that first half last week. I'm sure Sean Lane would have known that he had an off night with his hands and didn't need to be reminded, and he'll come back better from that tonight.
So just on what you were talking about then, with the kicking game, it wouldn't just be the kick itself. You're also including the kick chase. Would that be right?
Absolutely.
In the rating it?
Yeah, absolutely. The kick chase, and depending on where you are in the field 60s, there are limited kicks that you can kick. So you rely on your kick chase. When you're 40 metres out, you kick high into the corners. You kick it high to allow your defenders to get that one line and make that tackle as close as you can to the try line. So it's not about how high or how long the kick goes, but where your defence makes that tackle. So absolutely. And if you have one person not on song tonight against Pappenhausen in this wet ground,
And Josh
that's all he
Anakar too.
needs.
Yep, those two,
one person.
Those two are so fast.
Yep. So it's massive. The kick chase, I mean, when you played under sevens, how many times did your coach say the kick is only as good as its chase? It couldn't be any more true.
Truism for a reason, eh?
Kick to the Seagulls.
Yeah, I didn't get that one. I come from Tamworth. We didn't have Seagull.
No.
We had
too far
magpies and
inland.
galahs.
Yeah.
That's a famous Jack Gibson advice to Peter Sterling: kick to the Seagulls, kick where the players aren't. I actually borrowed that coaching kids with schoolboy football with the dummy half to look up and see where the players weren't and to pass the ball in the direction where the players weren't, so they were passed to the Seagulls. Now, just one last thing, Joey. Besides the kicking game and maybe looking at a few areas where we've got an advantage over the Storm, what is it, in your opinion, that the Storm just does spectacularly well that we're going to have to be at our best to deal with?
They don't believe they can't win from any position on the field, whether, and I mean that in a point sense. They just don't have a lack of belief that they're not going to win the game. They just believe that if they're 12-0 up at half-time, they're going to win. If they're 12-0 down 10 minutes into the game, they're going to win. If they're 12 points down with 8 minutes to go, they're going to win. It's their belief. It's their belief in every player doing their job to win that next momentum set. That's what they do well, better than everyone else. Just their level of confidence. And you get confidence from winning. You get confidence from being able to get out of situations. And they've been doing that for 10, 15 years.
It's a culture for a reason, isn't it?
It's a culture. Yes, it is, Jono.
Well, mate, thank you so much for joining us as usual. Unfortunately, we did have the wet weathers played havoc with the games this week, so we've got the junior reps cancelled.
And we got some updated information too to go through on the previews.
We word you out at Shark Park or whatever name it goes by these days, but PointsBet Stadium. So that's been cancelled, but hopefully the weather picks up a bit better next week and we'll be back on track for round 8 of the junior reps. So thanks again for joining us, Joey.
Thanks, guys. It's great. Thanks for everyone being here. And, really loved it. Really loved this episode. And I hope Mary Kay doesn't do too well, because I mightn't be back next week.
Bit of friendly rivalry there from Joey. Thanks, mate. All right, bear with us, everyone, as we have a bit of a swap around of seats here with Mary Kay joining the panel. But I'll just run you through some quick news that's come out now for the Jersey Flegg and the Canterbury, so it was the Canterbury Cup, but now the New South Wales Cup. With the junior reps were cancelled, and now we've had the relocation of the 2 senior grades. Jersey Flegg versus St George Illawarra Dragons will now be held at Macready Park on 1 o'clock on Saturday, and the New South Wales Cup fixture versus the Canberra Raiders will also be at Macready Park at 4 p.m. So they're both scheduled to be at Ringrose Park as home games for the Eels. With the senior game there, the New South Wales Cup was going to be streamed on Facebook by NSWRL TV. I don't know if that's been impacted by the change in scheduling, so just stay tuned on their channels to find out about that. Alrighty, Mary, good to have you on board.
Thank you so much for having me. I know I said 4:45, so I feel
fine.
like I'm right on time.
You are.
I think
bang
you're
on time.
perfect. Absolutely perfect.
The weather's dismal out there. It's so unfortunate for our first home game of the season, isn't it?
It certainly turned on the opposite of a good show, didn't it? It's very grey, very dreary, very, very tough conditions for football. Alrighty, so Mary's going to help us go through these previews very quickly before we talk some more general footy with her. So like I said before, junior reps are off this week. They're going to be rescheduled to an extra round of football, so 9 weeks of regulation football becomes 10, with this round slotting in that 10th week. So this was going to be an away triple header against the Sharks, and that'll now be in a few weeks' time. So going on to that Jersey Flegg game, and the Eels named a team that's probably bereft of a lot of stars in the Flegg because they're playing up in the New South Wales Cup. but we've got the likes of Sam Loizu, Matt Komalafi and Itasi James leading a pretty young team. What are we expecting out of him this week, 60s?
Look, I think one of the beauties about this is that it's like even though it's round 2, it is like a round 1 game. I don't know that I have any expectations for them, to be honest. It's a, as I said, they're not going in with any form. The trials were pretty average, to be honest. But as you say, there's reinforcements there with players who will bring a bit of class and a bit of an edge. But how they gel together, I guess we're really going to be wise to the event after we actually get to see it.
Yeah, I think the flag this year, and we've spoken about it earlier in other episodes, we're looking at these 2 grades, the flag and the New South Wales Cup, as very heavy vehicles for development this year. They're prioritising getting these blue chip young kids ready for their NRL debuts down the track, and so that's probably going to be reflective in some more tough results along the way, but that journey will be important for the development.
But I think that once they start to get a bit more time together, that the performances it'll be reflected in the performances. I do expect them to be a top 8 team, much the same as I expect that the New South Wales Cup, even though they had a really, really ordinary game against Penrith.
It was pretty dusty.
Look, let's be honest, Penrith just tore them to pieces, but I do expect again that once they start to gel as a team, that it's going to be reflected in the performances. And again, I'm expecting them to be a top 8 team. All I can say is as long as the games aren't impacted by weather cancellation, get out to Ringrose Park on Saturday.
Macready now.
Oh, sorry, Macready now.
Yeah, they're both games have been relocated to Macready. 1 p.m. for Flegg, 4 p.m. for New South Wales Cup. So
this is what, about third change
yeah,
of the venue?
It's been a rough week for football logistics. Well, do you have another update, Joey? Is there something else happening? Sorry, guys, we are literally getting. Is it Macready? Okay, so we can confirm it is Macready, and we believe it is 1 p.m., 4 p.m. So there's a big gap between games. We're not really sure why, but that's what we've been told. So thanks for that, Joey.
And I'd probably say stand by for any further announcements with that, because
keep jumping
with the weather
Wales
and the grounds and they'll obviously want to get it underway, but there could be last minute changes. So just stand by on that.
Alrighty, Mary, we'll get you involved on this next one for the New South Wales Cup. This is a very young team, and I'm just looking at the key inclusions for the Eels, and it's the likes of Sean Russell, Solomone Naiduki, Will Penasini, who's gotten a lot of press lately, Jacob Arthur, who most people would know as the son of Brad, Dave Hollis and Charbel Tassapali. But there's some other great players there around, and we've got the likes of Jordan Rankins leading the team at captain, and then you've got Tim Laffey in the back line giving a bit of experience as outside the top 30 players, what I was trying to get to. What do you look forward to in this team?
I'm really excited about seeing more from Will Penasini.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's a player that I know has tremendous raps on him. We probably won't see him in first grade this year, but he's a player that I'm really excited about watching develop this year. And similar with Jacob Arthur, I mean, he is also a player that has raps on him, probably still too young and needs some more experience, especially in a position like halfback that is absolutely so fundamental. But I'm looking forward to seeing what they can bring to this contest. And
they're up against a pretty tough first start opposition. The Canberra Raiders are no mugs. I'm looking at their team list, and the likes of Caleb Aikens, who's come over from Penrith, Semi Valemi on one wing, and you've got a big front row featuring Corey Horsburgh, Tom Starling, who was dynamite last year, and then Emre Gula. So it's a pretty tough first start opposition.
I think this demonstrates why I think the Canberra Raiders are such a threat this year, in that they have such tremendous depth. Like, if you look at names like Corey Horsburgh, Tom Starling, it still baffles me that he's not in Canberra's top 17 and playing every week. It's going to be a really tough game because Canberra, I think, have amongst the best depth in the competition.
And I think it also speaks to the youth policy that's happening at Parramatta at the moment, that not only do we have young players, but they are young players that have been elevated up to New South Wales Cup level with a view to the future. So, it's a contest of a bit more experience versus the youth. Whatever happens, as I said, to me, with the bye last week for them, this is virtually a round one clash. So whatever happens, it's going to be they'll be better for the run.
Yeah, and like we said, this is very much a development vehicle for these kids, but there is still some very good first-grade talent sprinkled across the team. Tim Laffey is no mug. He's a good pickup for the club. You've got, as we spoke about, Jordan Rankin's helping Jacob Arthur in the halves. And you've got the likes of, in the back row, Ray Stone and Kicking Hipgrave, alongside Makahesi Makatoa, who is a very solid New South Wales Cup player. So this will be a good first hit out for them, coming off that round one bye, like you said, 60s. If they can get the bickies, I'll be very happy. Alrighty, so as I said, this game is meant to be streamed on New South Wales Rugby League TV, which you can get on Facebook Live. But with the change of venues, I don't know what that means. So just keep a tab on their notifications to see where they're at with that one.
The only other thing I'll say about that game is just how important it is to have this competition. Given COVID last year, a lot of these young men would have missed out on a year of development. So it'll be good to see them back in action, and crucial development, I think, for hopefully their inclusion in the first grade squad at some point.
That's an outstanding point, Mary. Yeah, every team was impacted massively by the lack of a reserve grade last year. And I think especially the Eels, where we sort of ran out of steam because we couldn't have both the internal scrimmages and also just guys coming up from playing football ready to plug gaps. So very happy to have the New South Wales Cup back in its current iteration. Let's get on to the main event now. The NRL tonight at 8:10, I believe it is. The Thursday night kickoff is very late. Melbourne Storm coming to town. Their team list reads as Ryan Pappenhuisen at fullback. You've got George Jennings and Josh Adokar on the flanks. Ramus Smith and Justin Olam in the centres. In the halves, there's Jerome Hughes and Cameron Munster, always a danger there. Front row is very experienced with Jesse Bromwich, Brandon Smith and Christian Welch. And in the back row, they've got Felice Kafusi, Kenneth Bromwich and Big Nelson Asofa Solomona as their starting 13. Their bench reads as Tyson Smoovey, Tui Kamikamika, Tom Eisenhue and Chris Lewis, with their extra 18th and 19th man being Nico Hines and Darren Schoenig. So who jumps out of that team list for you guys?
Everyone.
Yeah, I mean, they are the reigning premiers. They did lose Cameron Smith, but they still find ways to win. So
the thing about losing Cameron Smith, and the thing that I find incredible about the Storm, is that for years people have sort of written them off because they've lost players. Like they lost Cooper Cronk, we'll write them off. They lost Billy Slater, we'll write them off. But as long as Craig Bellamy is leading this team, I don't think you can write them off. And just on that hooker position, like I honestly don't know how they do it. They've lost Cameron Smith. The replacement for Cameron Smith is Harry Grant, who is one of the most exciting young prospects in the competition. He's out. They've still got a great player in Brandon Smith playing in that position.
He's all right, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. So how do they do it?
It's called being the premiers, I guess.
Yeah, and the outstanding systems they have in talent development and talent identification. So
yeah. It's hard to find a weakness at all within that Melbourne team. We were just talking to Joey about the absolute basics that Parramatta have to do well, and the kick chase. That's going to be a key part to our victory, and I'm going to say our victory. So let's just go back a week now, Mary. It might be a little bit painful, but let's go back to that first half last week. Can you talk us through your emotions watching the opening 40 minutes?
How honest am I supposed to be amongst friends here? Very honest?
Look, yeah, it's you. We're just amongst close friends here, so yeah, be as honest as you need to be.
Look, I have to be honest, I was pretty frustrated with that first half. Let's leave it at frustrated. I'm a very, very passionate fan. I ride the highs and the lows of this team, and I suppose after so many months off from footy, I was expecting a little bit more in that first half. Truth be told, at the end of the first half, I got so cranky and said, I'm not watching this anymore, and went into my room and read a book with the door open so I could still hear the commentary. And then, of course, Parramatta started fighting back, and I was like, well, what do I do now? Do I stay in my room or do I come out? So I didn't actually watch the second half because I'm very superstitious, and of course it was all my fault. So I stayed in my room. So I'm actually kind of worried about being here tonight. I don't know what it's going to do to the team.
Well, look, I'm superstitious as well, which is one of the reasons for my halftime tweet, where I try to stay off social media during the game because I normally end up looking like an idiot. If I'm boasting about a great performance in the first half, things fall apart in the second. If I'm critical of a performance in the first half, well, there's a chance that things will come good. And I'm proud to say that I was critical at halftime, so I am actually responsible for the victory. I'm going to take that.
So it's not my fault. Okay,
No, it's
so
not.
Great. That's really good. Great.
The crowd having their way with 60s there.
So look, my first reaction after the game was typical Parra, to put us through the ringer with a game like that. But then I thought, actually, no, it's not typical Parramatta, because typical Parramatta in our heartbreak sides would be to have our hopes up at halftime and then have the hopes dashed. I mean, that's probably the negative. That's probably the negative thinking aspect of it as a Parramatta supporter, to feel, oh, they're going to let us down, they're going to let us down. But in fact, I think it's a good pointer that this first half was so awful, and we found a way to come back when the first half was so awful, and we did it in quite a composed manner when all was said and done. And even at the end of the game, the championship minutes, Mitch Moses was finding the exact type of game that we needed him to find in that last 10, 15 minutes of the game.
It's such a great point, because I feel like for so long, one of the criticisms of Parramatta have been that we don't know how to finish off a performance, or we're from behind and we don't know how to win and play composed, smart football. The fact that we were so many points down and were able to come out for that final 40 minutes and fight our way back into the contest and then finish it off was really positive.
Yeah, and I think what really spoke to that was that the kick and the kick chase, when the ball was kicked into the in goal and the players got down there on a great kick chase, forced the line drop out, and that basically wrapped up the win because we scored just after that. So, really positive, good game management at the end, exactly what you want to see from your halfback. Yes, you might want to see it for a bit longer in the game, but I'll tell you what, I'd much rather see it at the time when it really, really counts than, just splashes of it throughout the game.
Let's also start tonight as we finished last week.
Yeah.
So let's continue that.
Exactly, Mary. With an eye on tonight, but looking at the past as well, Parramatta's record against the Storm over the years is 24 Storm victories to Parramatta's 14. It might surprise everyone listening, but the Dogs actually have the best record against Melbourne at 21 apiece, while the Roosters and Manly are only actually slightly better than Parramatta, which is a bit of a surprise. But it's hard to sort of draw back and think on any noticeable wins against the Storm, because that's the nature of how they beat you. They're so comprehensive. Do you have any happy memories against Melbourne?
I have one, and it's actually really funny that the weather is the way that it is, because the weather was the same on this night back in 2010.
2010.
The weather was so bad, in fact, that I remember driving here early and having a change of clothes and towels in my car, because I thought this is going to be really, really wet and stormy. And I'm thinking it's 2010 because it was the year after the salary cap news broke for the Storm.
We played them shortly after the actual entire thing had broken, and it was a very spiteful game.
It was the first time we'd played Melbourne since that news had been announced, and Parramatta won that game. And I remember being sort of towards the hill end of Parramatta with this group of really, really vocal fans. I think we were all waving wooden spoons. I was perhaps a bit more childish in those days. But that is the only time, really, that I've got a happy memory against Melbourne. I mean, we did beat them last year, but I don't count it as much because that was during the Origin period, and the Storm really fronted what was a very, very young and inexperienced team. But the 2010, I remember it, and it was a very wet and gloomy night.
Now, just on to tonight, we are at home, so that's a big advantage. And one stat which I just had handed to me was that our win record away from home in recent times is something like 20%. So for us to come from behind last week with such a poor record was a great turnaround on our past performances.
And I have to say, really this year for Parramatta, I think it is so fundamental that we start the season well. Because if you look at rounds sort of 18 to the end of the year...
It's a punishing run home.
It's a punishing run home if what happens with the season goes to plan. So the teams that we're sort of expecting to sit in the top 5, we're playing them towards the back end of the year, all in a string. So it's a horrible run home. So the more wins that we can get early, it's always for the better, but particularly this year.
Now, I want to actually go away from Parramatta at the moment, and this is probably something that everyone's got an opinion on. During the last week, on your Ladies Who League website, you wrote a great article about Joseph Suwali and the exemption that's been granted to Joseph Suwali. Can you give us a bit of a précis on what you wrote about in that piece?
I sure can. So I think I'll start off by saying I don't have a problem with the Sydney Roosters at all. And I certainly don't have a problem with Joseph Suwali, and I hope he has a really exciting, wonderful career. But as I understand it, the NRL has a rule in place that players are not to play NRL before the age of 18 years old. That is it's a black and white rule. There is absolutely no way to interpret around that rule, and that rule was brought in for a reason. We talk about the physical demands of the game, but there are also mental demands of the game as well. And I think it's important that we recognise that young people potentially might not be ready for the step into NRL. In the Super League, they've got a similar rule, but it actually allows for some exemptions. What I don't like about this decision is I don't understand why the NRL have done it. And if they want flexibility in the future, just change the rules. I mean, over the summer, we saw a bunch of rule changes. I don't know how they all came in. So the NRL clearly has the ability to change rules. So if you want flexibility around a player, simply change the rule.
That's a pretty good way of putting it, Mary. I like that.
and to me, look, as you said, that flexibility is probably the key to it, because I think probably that most people are reacting to it like, why? Why is there... I know you said you don't have anything against the Roosters, but I bet there's a majority of people out there who have that perception that a rule was changed.
Thanks, Joey.
That there was...
Yeah, exactly.
What's our reaction in here? Do people think that the rule was changed for the Roosters?
Like, if it was the Bulldogs, would the rule have been changed? If he wasn't threatening to go to rugby, would the rule have been changed? If he wasn't the next big thing? And to be honest, just on that next big thing point, I of course want the best players playing rugby league, but I don't really worry about the talent we've got in our game. Like, if you look at the next generation of young players coming through, I don't think we've got a problem, and I don't think we need to worry about, oh, that guy's going to go off to rugby union. Sorry, 60s, I interrupted you.
No, I was... What you were just saying to me then, the thing that crosses my mind about that is, you know what I want? I want people playing our game who actually want to play our game. Not someone who is tossing up whether to play rugby union or rugby league based on the amount of money that's thrown their way. If someone wants to play rugby league, they're going to play rugby league if they get a reasonable sort of offer. And if they have to wait 6 months or 12 months to be an age that they can play, if they love the game, they're going to make it in our game. And if we're worried about someone that is maybe going to code hop at a young age, let them code hop.
Tell you what, I'd be pretty cranky if I was the Newcastle Knights. So Bradman Best, they had to wait for him to turn 18 years old. So what is the process about it? Often people are looking for transparent, clear decisions. And I just don't think in this case it's been made. I mean, Andrew Abdo spoke this week and said, you know, this isn't an exemption that'll be granted very much in the future. It's a special exemption. Well, what were the circumstances in which that exemption was granted? And additionally, like, we have a duty of care to these players. He's only a couple of months away.
That's back-to-back weeks we've gotten the big soapbox out on the tip sheet. So, Joey, do you want to come over here and drag that away for us, mate? Put the soapbox back around the corner, and we'll get it out next week as well. Joey's looking at us really confused now. He's taking it as a literal soapbox out. I'm sorry, mate.
I got on my soapbox. Apparently we get the soapbox out on this show. Yeah. It must have been Joey last week, me this week.
We had to go up the other rules last week, so yeah, we've been ranting and raving a little bit. But moving on, another thing that you've written about recently in regards to women in general in rugby league, and as well something that you advocate heavily for, is the NRLW. And it's a topic that's come up a lot about expansion, and not just expansion, but developing the competition into a sort of bigger beast, as it were, rather than being single round robin. How much do you want to see that competition expand in terms of teams, in terms of competition, and what's your timeline as someone that's heavily involved?
So I think the first thing to make really clear is that I actually like the way that the NRL has gone about it, because we want a strong, sustainable, marketable competition. And when the NRLW happens every year, everyone is left wanting more.
Yeah, 100%.
There is no poor quality games, and we absolutely love it. And that's the quality that I want to see. But we've been stagnant for the last couple of years, and COVID obviously threw a spanner in the works. So I completely understand that. And there were many women that made pretty tremendous sacrifices last year to play in that competition. So if we think about the New Zealand Warriors women that are based in New Zealand, they did a 2-week quarantine in Australia when they arrived, played in a 4-week competition, and then went back to New Zealand and did a 2-week quarantine there. So it's a lot to ask. This year, I think we need to see the teams play each other at least twice. I think we are at the point where we can do that. And then I'd also like to see an announcement this year about the next teams to be granted licences. And they don't necessarily need to join the competition next year. Could be the year after that. But I know we want to see it happen. Yeah, we want to see it happen. And there are a number of teams that, have sort of put their hands up. I know Parramatta are interested. I know the West Tigers are interested. Newcastle, Canberra, Gold Coast. So there are plenty of teams that are interested. While actually we're doing the soapbox, I might just drag it out once again since I've got a willing audience. I just want to talk about one more thing in the women's game, and that's State of Origin. Now, a lot of people have said we want more than one game. We want a 3-week series. And to all of you, I say thank you, because the women's game deserves it, and it's so awesome to see people so interested in it. But what I want to say is that the women's game has different considerations to the men's. So I'll talk you through it. When Boyd Cordner gets the call on a Sunday saying you're going into State of Origin camp, he gets his time off from the Roosters, he packs his bag and goes off to camp. When Kezzy Apps gets that same call, she needs to work out what she's going to do about work, how she's going to get the time off to be able to compete in State of Origin. So I just want everyone to keep that in mind when they're calling for a bigger series, because these players have pretty significant demand put on them. And when we think about this year too, they're also hopefully going to be playing in a World Cup at the end of the year. So that's another 4-5 weeks at the end of the year that need to be accounted for. And these women are juggling lives, jobs and families.
So to frame it this way, we love that everyone wants to see the tri-series for the State of Origin for the girls, but we also need to start working through a process to make sure that they can financially account for themselves to do that.
Absolutely. And I heard a question from the back as to why we don't have women playing before this game. It's a great question, and I think recently Parramatta have made some decisions about their game day experience, and I'm hopeful that what that means is potentially we start getting women's games before the NRL. And there was a point where touch football was happening before the main game, and I love that, seeing the men and the women play. So I think it's a great point.
Well,
Thank you.
Now, just to that, because you mentioned about the difficulties of having a 3-game Origin series with the responsibilities that some of the ladies have with their work commitments, because they're not full-time footballers outside of the game. They're involved in their careers, their varied careers. So the question then is, the NRLW, with an expansion of the NRLW or an increase in the games, does that put a similar burden on them, or is that something that we can work around?
I think it does put a similar burden on them, but given that a lot of them are able to juggle work responsibilities during the week with training, and training is put at a time when the majority of players can attend, I think we can juggle it, but we need to make sure that we're growing the competition and at the same time paying these women what they deserve. And that doesn't necessarily mean we're putting them on $1 million contracts, but we need to see them compensated for their time.
Fair's fair, isn't it?
Yeah.
All righty. 60s has got a game drawn up for us here, so you want to walk us through that one, mate? Sorry. You've got a game for Mary now that you're going to play in terms of a question for her.
Just before we get to a game, I do want to ask Mary, what do you think will be the ideal number in an NRLW competition?
That's a hard question, because I'm looking short term. What I will say about that, I won't give you a number, but I will say that I don't think we need to mirror what the NRL has done. Mm-hmm. I think if we were looking at the NRL competition today, we would probably say maybe there are too many Sydney teams. I think given we're building the NRLW from the bottom up, we've got time to think about new markets potentially. Maybe a team in Perth, maybe another Queensland team, maybe teams, from around the country and not so many Sydney teams. So that's what I'll say. We've got an opportunity to think about it.
I'm probably in that category of people that's impatient with that, because I look forward to the NRLW competition each year, but then because there's only the 4 teams, the grand final's often decided.
Week 1.
Yeah, week 1, literally. And I don't know that there's an answer beyond an expansion. I mean, they could play each other twice, and then
the double round robin's the most obvious expansion of the competition.
That's the easiest step.
Yeah. So, and then the next question, just relating to that, is if there are more games played, would you still have them at venue? Would you have them at venues before an NRL game, or would you have them as a standalone event?
I think there's options to do both. That's what I think is exciting about it. A lot of people call for the women's state of origin to be put before the men's. I completely disagree with that. I don't know whether any of you have been to State of Origin, but no one actually goes to watch the earlier games.
I mean, there's 16s, 18s, and 20s being played before then, and no one turns up.
The stadium is absolutely bare, and our women deserve better than that. And for anyone that's been to North Sydney Oval for that Women's State of Origin match, it is absolutely rocking. It really is. I think the next step for that Women's State of Origin, I think we've actually outgrown North Sydney. So 2 years ago when it was there, I think they ran out of drinks. Everyone had to, wait hours to go to the bathroom. I actually think somewhere like Bank West is the next challenge. Let's fill Bank West for Women's State of Origin.
I like it.
Me too.
Now, we've just had some late news. Brett Kenny is going to be joining us within a couple of minutes.
Ooh, I'll have to get off the stage.
It looked like he was not going to be here till a little bit later and in our second stint, but I've just been advised that he's very close to arriving. So for anyone here who's here to see Brett Kenny, we'll have him here shortly with us. So please stick with us, and those of us who are listening live on the podcast, it did look as if it was going to be a bit later. It did look like it was going to be after 6:30, but it is going to be very soon. So stick with us and stay on our live podcast.
The joys of broadcasting live.
You
roll for punches.
You can now tell that this is live. You can probably hear a bit of the hum in the background because Pablo's is quite full at the moment, and it's a new experience for us going live with the tip sheet. So, just to finish off, Mary, if we had Christmas in March and you were able to give some presents to players right now, and this is going to put you on the spot. If I name a player, what Christmas gift you would give him right now? Okay.
All right, and then maybe at the end I can pick a player that I want to give a gift to.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right,
yeah, absolutely,
cool. Okay.
absolutely. So I'm going to start off with Gutho, King Gutho. What would you provide for King Gutho?
Isn't the answer to all of them more tries? Like tries for tonight? Like
bad.
many tries for tonight? Plenty of Guthorinos for Gutho tonight, because when he does the Guthorino, he's happy, and I want to see him happy out there tonight.
I was thinking something in the way of hair product for Gutho.
Oh, like a physical gift.
Yeah,
oh.
a physical. Well, I mean, it can be a physical gift. It could be a wish for something to happen. Okay, so I'm going with some sort of hair product for Gutho. Maybe I've seen there's some great scrunchies that are available. People get scrunchies made to order. So, maybe a blue and gold scrunchie.
I have one, a sequin one. I'm not wearing it tonight. I forgot to, but that's a good idea. He also really loves his dogs, so maybe we could get him a photo shoot for him and his dogs, or is that a bit weird?
No. If you own a dog, nothing's to it. I think you love those little things. So.
Okay, Mitch Moses.
Ooh.
Wow, that's a toughie. Mitch Moses. What am I giving to Mitch Moses as a gift? Have you got any ideas?
I don't know. For Guffo, I was going to say maybe slow the game down a little bit, because when the fittest player in the competition's complaining that it's too fast. But for Mitch, I don't know.
I'd like to give him a week or two free of being harassed by the media and supporters.
I think that's a great idea.
Honestly, I know that you get paid the big bucks to be playing halfback, but I reckon there's probably very few halfbacks that cop as much stick as what Mitch Moses does, even if he has a decent game. So, I give him a week or two free from media or fan scrutiny.
I think that's a really good one.
Okay. Cash Marnie. Reed Marnie.
Reed's perfect, isn't he? He doesn't need any more gifts after his performance last weekend.
I was thinking maybe like a new pillow or something like that, because the number of minutes that he's playing lately, I reckon he could do with a good sleep.
Or a massage, maybe.
I'm not going there.
Not you,
No.
but like a voucher for him to go away to one of those
not that
resorts.
there's anything wrong with that, but no, I'm not giving Reed a massage.
I didn't know. Yeah, okay. Let's move on.
Maybe a little love to his ears as well. The poor bloke's got the old cauliflower ears going like he's a rugby union lock. So
I also want to give Blake Ferguson a gift. I want him to score lots of tries tonight. I know he had some trouble finding the try line last year. He found it last weekend, and I just want him to keep building his confidence.
that's it.
Okay, now what about BA?
A premiership, come on.
That's it.
I actually feel sorry for BA. Anytime I've been to training and the players have been responsible for the soundtrack that gets pumped over the PA system, some of what is passes as music. No, okay, I'm old
Kids
man.
these
I'm
days, kids
I'm getting
these days.
kids these days. Old man yells at cloud. I'm going to yell at cloud about music. So, Mary, final word about tonight. What's your thoughts?
How are we going to do it? Who's going to score first for the Eels?
I don't like playing these games, gentlemen. I said that I was superstitious.
The heart's going.
I've got my fingers and my toes crossed. I just want to see Parramatta compete. I mean, last year I remember when we played the Roosters, I thought that was a really big test for us. And even though we lost the game, I was still really impressed with the effort that we put in. So that's what I want to see from them tonight. No injuries. And I also want to say to you both, thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun. And also on behalf of all Parramatta fans, thank you for the incredible work that you do. We are all one-eyed, lunatic Parramatta supporters, and to see how much time you devote to it and the energy at which you go with it is remarkable, and we all love you for it. So thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Oh, thanks, Mary. And can we have a round of applause for Mary Kay from Ladies Who Lead,
Go Parra.
bringing a bit of class to the Cumberland Throw.
More than a bit, I think. Alrighty. So we are waiting for Brett to come still. So we're going to run through the Parramatta team ahead of kick. Hey, getting a bit rowdy out there. We'll run through the Parramatta team quickly as we count towards kickoff. Yeah, okay. Okay, so captain of the team from fullback, as always, is Clinton Gufferson. On the flanks, you've got Micah Seaver on the number 2 and Blake Ferguson in the number 5. New recruit Tom Opicic is at left centre. There was some late mail, I believe, wasn't there? We had Brent Reid talking about Wonga Blake potentially being out for this game.
Yeah, I think I don't know if anything's been confirmed around the starting side as yet.
So we'll have some hopefully get some late mail on that. But at this point in time, it looks like Wonga Blake might be out for tonight. There is Hayes Dunster inside the 19 still, so he's a potential target to come into the back line. But outside of whoever plays at right centre will be Blake Ferguson, as I mentioned. In the halves, you've got Dylan Brown and Mitchell Moses. The all-star front row of Reagan Campbell-Gillard, Reed Marnie and Junior Paulo will be controlling the middle for the Eels. And in the back row, you've got Sean Lane, Ryan Madison and Nathan Brown at lock. The bench reads as Oregon Kafusi, Isaiah Papali'i, who was outstanding against the Broncos last week, alongside Will Smith and Murata Niokore, who's back from suspension. He's a massive inclusion for the Eels, and he's the one change on Teamless Tuesday that we had prior to the news about Wonga Blake. The extended roster is Keegan Hipgrave and Hayes Dunster as the 18th and 19th man respectively. 60s. What do we think is going to happen tonight? We spoke about it with Mary. We know it's going to be a tough game. We spoke about it with Joey as far as a kicking game. Is there anywhere else that you think the Eels can win or at least negate the influence of the Storm in some capacity?
Well, I am actually advocating for a more conservative game from us tonight. I'd like to think that, especially in the first half, that we go about winning the middle and then, I suppose, look, just getting those completions right. Where the football is all about completions, getting into good field position, applying the pressure, being patient. So for me, what I'm looking for tonight is maybe not so much that I'm targeting anyone in the Melbourne Storm, although we did talk about the side that the Rabbitohs exploited last week, but Melbourne just do things so well. You can bet that whatever issues they had against the Rabbitohs last week, they would have been working on all week. So I'm expecting that what we need to do is to play a good basic rugby league, win the middle, apply pressure, force line dropouts, good kicking game, and before we even think about getting too expansive.
Now, these two teams met twice in 2020. The Parramatta Eels took the Bickies in the first occasion, 14-0 at Bankwest itself. And then in the finals, unfortunately, the Parramatta Eels dropped the game 36-24, which hurt a lot. But do you think that they can take a lot of the lessons learned from those two games?
Well, I think we learned last year that when we played tight, which was what we basically did in that game at home at Bankwest Stadium, that was a really tight game. The Storm had a lot of players out, but Parramatta basically were looking to grind out a win that night. They knew that they had a full strength or close to a full strength team against a team that was badly weakened, but they just went about winning the basics. Now, when we played in that semi-final, there was a real urgency to get early points, and we delivered those early points. The only problem being that once some unfortunate injuries occurred during the game, it was hard to come back from that. Mm-hmm. And that really completely disjointed the team. Losing Micah Sevo, and then we had Murata came on to fill in at centre.
Correct.
Then he got injured.
Yep.
Then Andrew Davey was forced to play centre.
Then Fergo got hurt.
And then we had later on Blake Ferguson getting injured. That's when you're looking at forwards on the bench and you lose backs during a game. It's a lot of the game plan is surely it goes astray.
Now, he was a blog favourite for a long time before his breakout year in 2020, but how big of an inclusion is Murata Niokore this week for the bench? 60s is unfortunately otherwise occupied at the moment. So, yeah, speaking on Murata, I think he sort of elevated himself as one of the premier bench players in the NRL in 2020, and that role was something we've spoken about being so important to not just Parramatta's success, but success across the NRL in general. Where do you think Murata stands as a bench forward now?
He's a middle forward, absolutely a middle forward. Now, mate, just on that, and this is the beauty of live performances or live appearances. What we're going to do, Brett Kenny's yet to arrive, but what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of a break.
Okay.
We're going to put you in the hands of Oscar Kami, who's going to entertain us until Brett Kenny arrives. When Brett Kenny arrives, we'll come back for a quick chat.
Bit of an interchange rotation going on here.
Yeah, so Oscar, if we can throw it over to you, and thank you for your patience in what happens with live events and things being thrown on us at the last minute. So thank you, everyone. We'll be back as soon as Brett Kenny arrives in the building.
Thank you.